All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Unit 1.2, where we're going to learn about the distance formula as well as the midpoint formula. Again, I want to remind you that you have all the power in your hand to pause and rewind if something is unclear. Okay, now let's first look at distance formula. Some of you might have to remember it, but I hate memorizing. I have no memories left, so I like to understand where things come from, and then I try to derive them. So in this session, I'm going to spend a little bit of more time explaining where the distance formula comes from, and you're going to encounter this again in the second half. Hopefully by then things will come more easily. So if you can read my chicken scratch, it says distance equals square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. What does x1, x2, y1, y2 means? These are the coordinates of 2 points, and these 2 points have to be on the same line. So if I'm asked to find the distance between the first point, which has a coordinate of x1 and y1, I need to know the coordinates of a second point, which is x2, y2. Once I have these 4 data points, I plug it in. Hopefully my calculator is a good one, then I've got the right answer. Okay, so let's do some examples here. Let's see, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna enlarge this chart here. Sorry about that. I'm making you dizzy probably. So let's look at this here. I'm gonna secure 2 points, the endpoints, or at least what it looks like is the endpoint on this chart here, and then I will label out this coordinate -5 and 3. This looks to me it's -2 and -3, right? Once I know the 2 coordinates, I can plug it into the formula on top. But before we do that, I want you guys to look at this. Why am I using x2 minus x1, which is -2 minus -5? -2 minus -5 is -2 plus 5, which should give me +3. So why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? I want to draw your attention to this right triangle. Notice that -2 is my x coordinates for this point at the bottom. -5 is here. If I use the -2 minus -5, that gives me 3, which is the distance of this portion, right? I'm going to use a different color, which is the distance of this right part. That's the distance of 3. And if I use the y coordinates, y2, which is -3, minus the y1, which is +3, I should have 6. So this distance is about 6 units. And if I use my Pythagorean theorem, I can find out what is the distance of that solid black line is, and that's my answer for this, right? After all, I'm looking for the length of that line, and in other words, I'm looking for the distance between point A and point B. Okay, I hope that makes sense with that chicken scratch. If it doesn't make sense, simply plug in the coordinates 1 and 2 for point 1 and point 2 and plug it into your formula. You can get to there as well. But a word of caution in high school, if you keep memorizing things, you won't get very far. Try to understand it, then you don't need to memorize it. So now let's see if I can bring this back to here. That's a little better. Sorry to make you guys this dizzy here. So let's see, the first approach, as I mentioned, I have identified this really should be here. There we go, that's much better. I have identified 2 points. The first point is -5 and 3. and the second point is -2 and -3. And now I simply plug it in. So if I call -2 as my x2 minus x1 would be -5. That whole thing squared plus -3 minus +3 squared. So that's my square root. And if I do my calculation quickly, I should have 3 squared plus -6 squared under the square root. And I should have square root of 45. If we want to simplify that, 45 is 9 times 5. So 9 is root 9 is 3. So it becomes 3 root 5. 3 root 5 is, if you use your calculator, is approximately 6.7. Okay, so the distance between point A, which is -5 and 3, and point B, which is -2 and -3, is approximately 6.7. So the next question here is find A and B when A is -4, 1, and B is +3 and -1, and you do the exact same thing. So now you have two coordinates, so simply plug it in. It doesn't matter which one is x1, y1, which one is x2, y2, as long as you're consistent. So in this case, I will do x2 minus x1, so that would be 3 minus -4 squared plus -1 squared. And I should have 7 squared and -2 squared and square root of that. If I do my math correctly, I should have square root of 53. So in this case, my calculator tells me it's approximately 7.3. Okay? I will leave example 3 as your own for yourself to figure that out. You should have the final answer comes out to be approximately 18.7 according to your calculator. Now, midpoint, let's look at the midpoint formula. This one is a little bit easier, believe it or not. The basic concept of midpoint is that midpoint is an average. So if I scored 100 in my last exam but scored a 90 in the second exam, the midpoint of my grade right now is 95. And how do I get there? I added 100 to 90, so I have a total score of 190. I divided them by 2, so that's how I ended up with an average score of 95. That's my point. So that's my midpoint. So the midpoint formula is simply, you have two coordinates like we did with the last one, x1 and y1, x2, y2, but you add the two x points together, divided by 2, then you add the two y coordinates together and divide it by 2. So in the first example, you've got G and H. So like I said, you simply just add the 2 together. So the midpoint is, if you add 7 plus 9 is the x1 and x2, and you divide it by 2. And then it's -5 plus -1. The whole thing divided by 2 again. And that is the coordinate of your midpoint. And if you simplify it, you should have midpoint of +8 and -3. Okay, if it's helpful, grab a sheet of graphing paper and graph it out, and you will see that as well. I will ask you to finish number 2. You should have final answer to be -2 and 0. That's your final answer for midpoint. In the next page, it's pretty much the same thing, but now we are asking the questions slightly differently. So here's asking us to find a missing endpoint. Let's see what's given. So keep in mind that the objective for this session is about distance formula or midpoint. So it has to be one formula or the other. So let's see. Find the coordinates of point A if M, most likely M is the midpoint, at -1 and 2 is the midpoint of AB, and B is coordinates of 3 and -5. So in other words, you've got a segment here. A is at 1 point. So if I have oops, sorry about that. If I have a line like this, and I would have an A with a coordinate of some sort, and I would have -1 and 2 as my midpoint, and I would have my B at 3, +3 and -5. I'm not drawing this right. Let me redraw this. I don't have a graphing paper here, but if I have a coordinates here, 3 and -5 should be here. -1 and 2 should be here, so that's my N. And if I connect the dots, right, this is my B, this is my A, this is my M, and somewhere here should be my A. So that gives you a sense that X should be a negative for A, and Y should be a positive. So let's see how I can do that. I know the midpoint is -1. And so that should be, if I call this x1, y1, this x2 is 3 and -5. So if I have x1 plus 3 divided by 2, I should come up with -1. And then for the y coordinate, I should have 2 equals y1 plus b plus -5 divided by 2, right? So if you do your algebra multiply by 2 on both sides, you should come up with x1 comes out to be -5, y1 should come out to be 9. So your final answer in here should be -5 and 9. Make sure that you get your x and y correct. Okay? So next, find the coordinates of J if K is the midpoint of JL and L has coordinates of -8 and 6. So again, a midpoint is given and an endpoint is given. It's asking for the other endpoint. This is the exact same approach as the first one, so I will not repeat this, but I will ask you to do it, and you should come up with -2, 14 as the final answer. If you have trouble, please come and see me or other teachers. Third one, find the coordinates of R if Q is the midpoint of PR and P has coordinates of 5, 6. Same question. One coordinate is given, midpoint is given. You set the second coordinates as x1 and y1, or set it as x2 and y2. It doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. And then you plug it into the midpoint formula, use a little bit of algebra. Your final answer should be -7, 0. Okay. Finally, some more examples. I'm going to move this up a little so that we can see everything. And number 4, if P is the midpoint of XY, XP, which is half of it, is 8x minus 2, and PY is the other half. Find the value of X. So now we have real serious algebra involved. The best thing you can do in any kind of math is you can draw some charts that helps you have a visual understanding of it. So let's see, we have a segment that's X and Y right here. P is right here in the middle. So it's saying XP is 8x minus 2, PY is 12x minus 3. By midpoint, right, this segment and this segment has to be exactly of the same length. So simply you set up that equation. Algebra is all about finding the equations, and if you do your algebra right, you can subtract 8x on both sides, and then you can add 30 on both sides. That way you cancel this one. On the left hand side you have 28, on the right hand side you have x. Your final answer is x equals 7. Now you plug 7 back in to double check your answers. 8 times 7 is 56, minus 2 is 54. So x piece length is 54. 12 times 7 is 84. 12 times 7 is 84. 84 minus 3 is 54 as well. So you've got both sides at the same length of 54. You just verified it. Okay? So question number 5 and number 6 are exactly the same. And I will write the answer here. And if you can bring your homework back to this note and homework back to school, that will be great. So there is a homework page for this unit. Make sure you complete that, and I will see you in class, everybody. Bye.